Hey everyone, it's Chris Carter here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's the Wednesday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast. We've got Ray Fittipaldo on. We want to talk about Cam Hayward because now he is 36 years old. He had 8 sacks last season. What has been the historical production of guys that reach that age and try to play at the level that he has, which has been an all-pro defensive lineman? We'll talk about that, TJ Watt's contract situation, and a look at how OTAs and the Steelers could be pushing it for a big change in how the NFL handled the offseason. All here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're your Steelers writers, and as always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, the show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you've been injured in an accident or you need help with workers' compensation, Edgar Snyder Associates has your back. Call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, let's talk about Cam Hayward because we've been talking about the guy who people hope can be the next Cam Hayward, Derrick Harmon, a lot. He's the rookie they drafted in the first round. But Cam Hayward is still with the Steelers, and he's still playing pretty strong. He just turned 36 years old. Funny enough, I think Cam and I are like a few days off in age. But he's a guy, a few months off actually, because he's I'm March. But he's a guy now that is entering a very rarefied air of players who could be an all-pro level player in the age of 35 or older. He's now 36. When looking up the history of players who have had 8 or more sacks, because he had 8 sacks last season, if he were to maintain that, there are 30 players in the history of the NFL who have had 8 or more sacks in a season where they've been 36 years old or older. One of them is Ernie Stautner, former Steelers superstar from way back in the day, and did that in 1962. Most recently would have been Julius Peppers. When you look at what he did back in 2017, Michael Strahan's done it. Bruce Smith did it a couple times. There's a lot of guys who fit that profile, but Ray, it's a ticking time bomb. Father Time's undefeated. How long can Cam Hayward keep the level of play that he has up and the different things that he does on top of being a pass rusher?
Yeah, it's a great topic because that's the storyline, right? Like how can a guy who's 36 continue to play at his level? But if you look back on history, you mentioned a lot of those prominent guys, and all those guys are probably future Hall of Famers, and I think Cam is certainly on that track. So I don't think it's as rare as one might think. I think the thing that makes Cam Hayward rare is he's a complete all-around defensive tackle who's putting up those sack numbers. I think when you think about Peppers and even Strahan at that stage of their careers, right, it was more about, being situational pass rushers, right, coming in on third down and, having that be the main role on the football team. Cam Hayward played probably 75-80% of the snaps during his age 35 season. So he's still a really good run defender. And obviously he's still producing the sack numbers as well. So to answer your question, I think as long as he's healthy, I think he can continue to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds here during the 2025 season because Cam played at a really high level in 2024.
And I think Cam Hayward, he brings that level to his game. I mean, you look at every year he's had, the only year he hasn't been a Pro Bowl player in the last since 2017 was 2023 when he was injured and missed 6 games. But other than that, he had 8 sacks this past year, 10.5 sacks in 2022, 10 sacks in 2021. He had just 4 sacks in 2020, but he was a major player in the run defense. 2019, he had 9 sacks there, 8 sacks in 2018, and he got his first double-digit sack season, which is still his best season, in 2017 when he had 12 sacks. But he's been 4 times first-team All-Pro. That's insane. And the idea that he could keep that up is also insane. But again, it's not unheard of. And I think that puts him, I think that people might underappreciate just the rarefied air of players who are able to do it like that at that age. Like, again, on that list of guys that have 8 sacks at that age or older, and we can take off like the glorified edge rushers that kind of just were like, hey, you're a tactician when it comes to like Kevin Green. Kevin Green was there to just go after the quarterback. He wasn't that much of a run stuffer or anything like that. But guys like Reggie White, guys like Bruce Smith, those were guys that they lined up kind of where Cam Hayward would line up a lot of times. Like they would move him around because they were just that physical. And that's the air that Cam Hayward is. And I think that's the respect that Steelers fans should kind of understand he carries with the organization and with the NFL.
Yeah. And if you think about the way Cam plays too, right? I mean, early in his career, and I think even, recently too, how many of his sacks come on just bull rushes where he's pushing a guard into the quarterback's lap, and then he's getting around him and he's getting his sacks that way. I mean, it's a brutal physical style of play that really does wear on the body. So for Cam to come off that season, let's face it, you referenced it. He missed 6 games. He probably should have missed about 10 or 12, right?
Yep.
I mean, he came back.
He rushed back
earlier than he should have because he felt like it was his duty to the football team. He was hobbled. It was obvious. A lot of people were saying, hey, Cam, your contract's up. Maybe it's time to hang it up. He bet on himself. He got that new contract. And, here we are today sitting here talking about another all-pro season for the guy. So to me, that's the most impressive part of it. Like when you think about some of the guys on that list, like Kevin Green, edge guy, using his athleticism a lot to get around the quarterback. I mean, Cam is a great athlete. I'm not taking that away from him.
Right.
But he is such a physical player that it's really impressive to me that he still excels in that style of a game at 36 years old. That is, we're talking about rarefied air with a production. It's rarefied air for a guy to play that style at his age as well.
And it's also, I think this is another reason why it's important they've invested so much in the D-line now with this draft and trying to put people in or trying to put people in to help him. Cam Hayward also played the 6th most snaps of any defensive player of the Steelers last year with 838. So like he's not getting no glorified snaps. He is playing a lot. He had more snaps than Dante Jackson, Keanu Benton, Alex Highsmith, Larry Ogunjobi, a lot of guys that were main rotation guys. So you look at that also is impressive. But that's also a reason why I think that it's important for these young guys to be able to step up soon so that you don't have to use him 830 snaps a season. You want him fresher. You want him fresh when it comes to the end of the season, and not fresh because no one's fresh in week 18 of football, right. But you want him not as worn down by the season. And let's face it, when your body gets older, it's easier to wear down. And I know Cam Hayward doesn't want nobody taking snaps from him, and he's going to be that guy. But if you can get these younger guys like Keanu Benton, Derrick Harmon, Yahya Black, if they can be guys that are helping more often and allow Cam Hayward to maybe play like 10% less snaps per game, that can be something that helps limit him from injury, helps him keep his body in order. And then you have him playing at a higher level at the biggest parts of the season.
Yeah, you're not going to be fresh, but you can be fresher.
Right.
And, listen, Cam Hayward was part of that defense that gave up 299 yards against the Ravens. I think everyone was kind of worn down at that point. Yep. I think the point is, how many of those guys were actually in that rotation? I mean, their rotation was thin. Well, the trend around the NFL is to play 8 or 9 defensive linemen. The Steelers sometimes played 5 in their games. There wasn't a big rotation. So I think with the addition of Harmon and Black, and it seems like they're going to keep Lowry around. You add Daniel Akwele, you have Benton. So it seems like they're trying to get up to speed with that trend and maybe play some of these depth guys a little bit more. I think that would be smart. And if you could even get Cam down to 650, 700 snaps, and he's a better player in December and January, I think you'd be doing your football team, a good solid there as well.
Absolutely. The other thing, like you said earlier, Cam Hayward this time last year, there was a question if Cam Hayward would be signing an extension with the Steelers, how much longer he would be with the Steelers. People were wondering, where did he be? He didn't show up for the first, 2 weeks of OTAs. Then he showed up for the last one and kind of made his case there. But there was a big question, should the Steelers even pay him? And when they did pay him, there were a lot of people that griped at us on this very show. Like, no, they shouldn't have paid him. Why would you pay that guy? He's too old. He can't keep doing this. And then he had the season he did last year. He was a first-team All-Pro defensive tackle. There's another guy who's a first-team All-Pro defensive player for the Steelers quite over several times over. That's TJ Watt, and he's in a similar situation. Granted, a bit younger, but people are wondering, should they pay him? We'll talk about TJ Watt and his contract situation as the Steelers head into OTAs next week. Next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Did you know they also do workers' compensation? When you've been hurt on the job, you need to know who decides when you're better, who decides when your treatment's over, and who decides when your benefits are over. The answer is always the same. It's the insurance company's doctors. They won't be on your sides. Edgar Snyder Associates will. Be sure to call Edgar Snyder Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They will fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's switch to talking about TJ Watt. TJ Watt, of course, in the middle of contract negotiations with the Steelers. He's entering his final season on his current deal with the team. He has a $30.4 million cap hit right now for the Steelers. There's a likelihood that he's asking for a lot more than that on an average per year basis in this next deal. TJ Watt, of course, is 31 years old right now. In 2025, he would be deciding if he signs a multiple year deal, he could get to the status where Cam Hayward is right now, or he'd be I guess a little bit younger than Cam Hayward, but a 3-year deal, 4-year deal could get him around for 34 when he's age 34 or 35. But the thing is, Ray, is that he's still a star edge rusher. He's still a guy that is a major playmaker for the Steelers, and even the best player on the Steelers. He's been an all-pro player, either first or second team in 5 of the last 6 seasons. The only season he won, like Cam Hayward, was one where he missed half the season because of injury. And so there's a question, should the Steelers pay him? And the question also is, how much will they pay him? Myles Garrett got paid $40 million a year. Him and TJ Watt came in the NFL at the same age. And I think it could be reasonable the Steelers end up paying him around the same rate at $40 million a year. And some people might think, oh, that's insane. But Ray, when we look at the salary cap increase, it might not be that crazy.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the guaranteed money, I think the Steelers might have to get close to $95 million in guarantees, which would be different from, their previous contract structures. Now they did guarantee more than the first 2 years in TJ's last contract, so the precedent has been set, and I think they're going to have to do that again. So, if you're talking about a huge contract like that, I think you're probably going to have to guarantee at least the first 2 years, and likely all of the third or part of the third as well there. So, listen, this guy's been a tremendous player for the Steelers for a long time. It might be a contentious negotiation, but in the end, Chris, and I can't tell you if it's going to be in June, July, August, or September, but in the end, I fully expect this deal to get done.
No, I'm right with your way, and like this. Listen, I know that TJ Watt a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point, put out that Instagram picture of him checking out the deuces. Like, oh, does that mean he's leaving? That's not happening. The Steelers aren't letting that guy walk out the door. It's not their way to let a player of that level who's been homegrown and been their guy just walk out and not pay him, especially when they have the money to pay them. It'd be different if it would be different, in my opinion, if like the Steelers were in a position where they were hurting for money because they were paying a superstar quarterback and they had to choose between TJ Watt and either keeping that quarterback or keeping, a star wide receiver to pair with that quarterback. But that's not the situation that they're in. And another thing about this is with the rising salary cap numbers, like people look at the raw numbers and think, oh, well, you can't pay an edge rusher $40 million. In today's NFL, you kind of can't. Like when you look at where TJ Watt's been paid and what he's been as a salary cap hit for the Steelers, he's been around the guy that's kind of taken in that kind of money in past years, where $41 million, sure, is a lot of money. The salary cap right now is at $279.2 million a year. It was much less than that when they signed him for $30 million a year on average before. And so what's happening right now at the NFL is you're seeing with the expansion of the season, with the money that they're going in, with the new streaming contracts that the NFL is signing, they're making more and more money, which means the players are getting larger and larger shares, which means salary caps are going up. And if salary caps are going up, the percentage of how much a contract like that is going to decrease. Like right now, if you based it off of this year alone, and you gave if you gave TJ Watt, let's say $41 million a year of the current salary cap, that'd be 14.6% of the salary cap percentage. Granted, that won't be the impact of what he pays or what he gets paid this year, because this year he's still getting paid $30.4 million. That's that's a lot less. Next year, the salary cap will be even higher. So it's going to be less than even that 14.6% we're looking at right now. It's not unreasonable to pay TJ Watt this money unless you're someone who thinks TJ Watt is done being an all-pro producer. And that's the big question I think that people have on their hands.
Yeah, and I think, there was some, I don't want to say decline in his play, but he didn't produce in December and January the way he would normally do. But does that mean that, he hit the wall when he's done? No, I just think they need to make some adjustments, and he needs to make some adjustments. And he spoke to that, Chris, on Locker Cleanout Day, the day after they lost to Baltimore, about he's going to be more willing to move around the defense. So offensive coordinators can't hone in on him and game plan against him the way they have done. If you're an offensive coordinator now and TJ Watt is going to be the left outside linebacker, they can scheme him out of games. And that's basically what happened for large portions of last season. So by no means do I think TJ is done. The one unique thing about, this offseason, Myles Garrett was due for a contract. TJ, Micah Parsons is due for a contract. Aiden Hutchinson is due for a contract. So now it's almost like a game of chicken, right? Like, okay, Detroit, are you going to be first? Is it going to be Pittsburgh? Is it going to be Dallas? Like, who's going to pull the trigger first? Who's going to go to 41? And then does it have to be 42, 43? I mean, if the Steelers want to save some money, they should probably get this done before Dallas or Detroit, but we'll see how that unfolds.
Indeed we will, because I do think there's going to be some bigger questions there. I do look at how the market continues to change. And it's why it's important to get out in front of things, right? Like, initially I remember when like Patrick Mahomes signed a 10-year contract with the Chiefs, and people were like, the Chiefs did what? But the Chiefs were smart, because what they did was, now they don't have to worry what Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen signs over the next 5-8 years, because they've got Patrick Mahomes at the price that they got Patrick Mahomes. So if the Steelers, and listen, J.J. Watt has referenced this on Pat McAfee's show, T.J. Watt's older brother. He was saying like, hey, teams should pay their superstars before they get to a place where they have to, they're kind of left with no other option but to negotiate, because then superstars are going to ask for big money. And that's obviously referencing what TJ Watt's going through right now. Maybe if the Steelers had signed TJ Watt before Myles Garrett signed with the Browns, maybe it would have been $36 million, $37 million. Maybe it would have been a little bit less. But now it's probably going to be $41 million to match or go just ahead of what Myles Garrett gets paid. And listen, I think TJ Watt's worth it. Like you're saying, I don't think TJ Watt is going to disappear. I don't think that he's going to be some lackluster player. I do think the Steelers need to figure out ways to, when teams are trying to minimize his impact, how do they counter that? And part of that, I think, is getting more guys up front who can be pressure creators on their own, so that you pay when you put two guys on him and you kind of have the personnel to be able to handle quick passes. If you're able to have those type of guys up front and in your secondary, then all of a sudden teams that try to just create their entire persona off of stopping TJ Watt will play into your hands, because now you're getting one-on-ones with guys like Cam Hayward, guys like Derrick, Harmon, guys like Keanu Benton. And if they can win those more consistently, then they're getting pressure up the middle. The quarterback's having a hard time throwing those quick passes. And even if they do, you need those guys that can play press man corner, which is why another reason why I think they're getting those big physical type corners like Joey Porter Jr., like Corey Trice, that can be, hey, we're going to get up in your face. We're going to press you, so that the quarterback, if he tries to throw it here, it's going to be into traffic. And I think That's a big part of the plan, is even beyond TJ Watt, is the Steelers believe in having top tier pass rushers, getting after the quarterback, stuffing the run, and having it so that it's going to be, if you're going to throw quick, you're going to pay for it, or at least put yourself in some risks in doing so.
Yeah, and I think the point should be made that great players always make adjustments during the offseason, right? Like Sidney Crosby is famous for working on one weakness each offseason, and then he comes back and he has just a great season in that area. And I think TJ is in that spot now. Listen, he's not going to lift weights and be as strong as he was when he was 25, but now that he's 30, 31, I think those mental adjustments, right? Like being willing to maybe be a little bit uncomfortable, play out of position. And if he does that, hey, it might not mean more sacks for him, but maybe it frees up somebody else to get a sack because coordinators are so preoccupied with him. So, that's part of the give and take. And I'm looking forward to see what adjustments he does make, because I think it was pretty clear by late last season that offenses were able to scheme him out of games. And obviously you don't want that to happen.
You want to make sure your best player can make big plays in big moments. We'll talk about that as we get into OTAs, but I want to talk about how OTAs themselves could be changing, and the Steelers have been a proponent of that. While a lot of other rules changes are being debated right now, another one that could be is the complete restructuring of how the offseason is. We'll talk about how the Steelers are leading that charge next year on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, remind you, the show is brought to you by UFC Gym Pittsburgh. Looking for a way to challenge your body and sharpen your mind? Step into something more than just a workout. Welcome to the brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy at UFC Gym. Here, it's not just about training, it's about living values of honor, discipline, and respect. Whether you're a total beginner or leveling up your skills, you'll be guided through a structured program and led by a third-degree black belt instructor who builds confidence, strength, flexibility, and real technique. Head down to the UFC Gym at the Waterfront or Market Square to learn about the exclusive 3-month introductory package today. Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, while the league's considering, I guess they're not considering changing the seeding of playoff teams anymore. The Lions rescinded that. They are considering the tush-push ban. One thing that could change is the way that the NFL does OTAs. And teams have been, including the Steelers, have been eliminating a week of OTAs because players are pushing for a specific proposal that will move basically the start of what is now known as OTAs and minicamp, move it later into the summer so that it all leads to a ramp up into training camp. What could be the impact of a plan like that, or what could be the motivation to have a plan like that instead of the one that they have right now, Ray?
Yeah, so the union is pushing for that, and I'm just going to give you I'm just going to say July 1st as an example. The union doesn't want their players in the building in April, May, or June. They want them just to have that 3 or 4 week ramp up to training camp, and it's just shortened to like a 6th or 7th month block where they have access to the players. Now it's like, okay, you report back, you lift, you do OTAs, then you get like a month off, and then you report back for training camp. So that's the union's idea. And we should stress none of this can change until 2030 because that's when the current CBA is up. But I think the Steelers and a lot of other teams are trying to appease the players. They're trying to say, okay, we're getting your message. You don't want to be in the facility that long during the spring. So we're going to cut back on OTAs. We're going to eliminate a week. And then, maybe that'll take care of it when it comes time for the next collective bargaining session, which will be coming up in a few years. They'll start talking about that new CBA probably in 27 or 28. So it's a bargaining chip right now. The union has been pretty vocal about it. And it seems like the Steelers and many other teams across the NFL are paying attention.
I think it's going to be interesting to see that. One thing it reminds me of is one time I had a conversation with former Steeler cornerback Ike Taylor. And he talked about how there's a difference between being in shape and football in shape. In shape, you can be at any point in time of the year. Just make sure you go to your workouts, run, do your morning runs, all those things. But then there's being football in shape, which isn't necessarily just about being, physically fit and having your cardio up or anything like that. It's about conditioning your body to take the hits that come with football week in, week out, get used to cooling down your body after that, recovering throughout the week, and then getting ready to do it all over again on Sunday. And he talked about how that's the thing in training camp that you're trying to establish. You're trying to get your guys used to that physical. It takes time to build up towards that. And that was something that the 70s, the NFL in the 70s had. They had like 6 preseason games. Training camps were so much longer. And so by the time they got to the season, it's also probably not great long-term for the body, right? Because guys were just beating each other up for a longer period of time. And that's why guys' careers couldn't last as long back then. But when you look at today, you're not even saying, hey, beat each other up for longer. You're just saying, hey, instead of having this big gap here, what if we have the start where rookie camp is a thing where guys come in, they get used to a little bit of a few things here and there. Then OTAs is just the light non-padded drills, kind of getting everyone's footwork in line, making sure they get there. That leads into mandatory mini camp, which is more of the same. Maybe you put on helmets a little bit, and then you get to training camp where you're doing all that. And now your body's used to the regular work schedule of practicing 3, 4, 5 times a week or whatever it is, and taking that break and then getting up, and then you start hitting a little bit at the start of training camp, and then you ramp it up. I can see the logic in that and how that could help players and stuff like that. Theoretically, if you were to follow that train of thought, could help limit injuries later in the season, if that's correct. But again, the human body is just there's a lot of things you have to calculate for. It's not a guarantee there, and it makes me wonder if that could be a thing that ends up working in their favor, or if this is more so, like you said, just a bargaining chip to try to get something else that the players really want, which might be, hey, don't make this an 18-game season.
Yeah, and I think really what they're trying to do is trying to take back their offseason, right? It's pretty much a full-time job, because people don't understand, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, until you get to minicamp, all that stuff is voluntary, okay, under the CBA. But really, Chris, it's only voluntary for guys like TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, DK Metcalf. Like the established guys can actually get away without going to those workouts. Whereas if you're a guy who's competing for a starting spot or a roster spot, you better believe you're going to be there. So I think that the union is trying to say, okay, let's eliminate that. Let's get rid of this voluntary stuff. We'll give you 7 months out of the year. You have full access to the players, but we actually want them to have an offseason. I think that's basically what's going on here.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. And again, like there's a lot of other things that are in play. There's always new deals, players looking for more money, but and other benefits that come with it. But certainly a lot of other things in play there when you're looking at teams like the Steelers pushing for a change in how things work during the offseason. Speaking of OTAs, those start next week. We'll get you a closer look at what those are on our Friday episode with Brian Batko here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. From Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, thanks for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, as well as the bonus content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back here Friday with Brian Batko here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.